What's up, guys? This is going to be the beginning of a series that I hope to continue. Basically, the intention is to be a little bit motivational for whether you're pursuing a peaceful art or a physical art. So these are about principles that help us in life and things like that, and reading from different books. To start with the book that really inspired me to live the twofold way and to accept the fact that I can focus on two different things instead of being focused on one. Don't get me wrong, focusing on one is great for business purposes and things like that. It's good to be good at one thing, but it's not necessarily the healthiest way. And the reason I believe so much in living this twofold way is, one big part of it is you have a physical practice and a mental practice. We're not just physical and we're not just mental. We need to fuel both of those. You need to fuel your creative spirit and that spirit of fighting for life, but also, physically, like body supports the mind. If I have an important phone call, I usually get up and am walking while I'm on the phone, because moving around is gonna keep you more alert, make you more on top of things. That is one of the reasons New York has a mentality of being so fast-paced and whatnot. And after living there for about 7 years, I realized that when I first moved there, I would get to places and I'd be like, man, well, I just finished walking like half a mile or more, multiple blocks, and walking up and down steps. And then by the time you get to your office, you're like, or wherever your job is, you're like, why am I so just like on it? I'm on it. See, we are physical beings. That is the reason for living a physical life. It keeps you more alert, keeps you more on top of things. So so basically this is the book that kind of, whenever I got the nickname the White Musashi, I was reading this book and it's really cool. It's Miyamoto Musashi, his life and writings, more of the true writings. It's his writings, and it's also people writing about him. So you get like more of a perspective on Miyamoto Musashi and the things he did. That being said, let's just get into it and see. See, I have all these, I haven't read this it's been a while. I believe it's been a few years since I've read this. But when I read it, I was just so enthused and loved it, and which is why I have a ton of marks here. So I'd like to do this with multiple books eventually, but right now we're going to start with this book, and we're going to read parts that are interesting and get kind of an idea, and then we'll elaborate on it. We're just going to find like the first tab that I got here. What I find so cool about this stuff is that these are principles and thoughts and ideas that kind of translate to whether you're practicing a physical art or a more cerebral mental art, or creative art. A physical art, martial arts, or if you're into sculpture, painting, because actually he was a sculptor and calligrapher is what it says in here. Yeah, a painter, sculptor, and calligrapher. Although the painting, sculpture, and calligraphy of Musashi are less well known, they are considered by connoisseurs to be of the first order. Because of the extension of his art into so many domains and the way in which he explored the limits of knowledge of his time, Miyamoto Musashi reminds us of Leonardo da Vinci, who I'm also a fan of, and got lots to say about him too, because I read his more recent biography, and super good. The biography by Walter Isaacson, good stuff. Yeah, I mean, eventually, if things pan out well, depending on how these do, or if I can keep this process up, I will do, hopefully read about Leonardo da Vinci by Walter Isaacson, and then also the Benjamin Franklin by Walter Isaacson, which Benjamin Franklin, that book, the one on Benjamin Franklin, was kind of recommended as Elon Musk's one of his top books for entrepreneurs. So anyway, so the first underlines I have in the book come to, it's now undeniable that Musashi never made a mistake in accurately assessing the strength of an adversary. This made it possible for him to avoid fighting an enemy capable of defeating him. The word mikiri became the established term for characterizing this particular acuity of Musashi's perception. The word mikiri, M-I-K-I-R-I, became the established term for characterizing this particular acuity of Musashi's perception. The origination of this term is attributed to him. The literal translation is mi, which means look or see, and kiri means cut. This means to see with cutting minuteness, or to cut through with a look, which amounts to discerning the state of situations or things with incisive precision. It basically means like accessing situations, picking your battles. And the reason this really speaks to me right now is because I have recently came across some information on a person that I wanted to confront them with, but being that they gave me the information in good faith, I can't really do that. I can't really say anything. So, but at the same time, I do think that things don't really change until you confront issues. So there's an issue with a friend and his ego getting in the way of the way things are going for multiple people. But sometimes you gotta pick your battles and accept things as they are and not say something. In my view, this precise discernment characterizes the sword of Musashi as well as his aesthetic expressions. If he judged an adversary as potentially his superior, he would avoid fighting him. Discernment of incisive position was, for Musashi, the basis of individual and collective strategy. Mikiri distills in one word one of the teachings of Sun Tzu. If you know yourself and you know your enemy, you will not lose one fight in 100. For Musashi, just being strong individually was not of such great value because he knew that the strength of a single person is limited and even insignificant in unfolding of a large battle. He would have preferred to apply his talent fully on a larger scale because he felt he had discovered a principle applicable to all phenomena of life. From the end of his adolescence, Musashi began to travel and engage in many duels. The age of 30 marked a change in his life. He continued to travel in order to deepen his art of swordsmanship, but he no longer sought out duels as he had before. At the same time, so if you're not familiar with Musashi's story, basically his final duel, like his last duel with Kojiro, one of his, probably the most famous duel he had, was around the age of 30. So after that, there was a little more to it. So there were a lot more people involved. He was being used politically. So one side against the other. Kojiro was, one lord's samurai versus Musashi. And Musashi was like, I'm not really with anybody, but somebody took credit for him for being with him, and because he was used in that way, he went through some stuff and was like, look, this isn't for me anymore. I don't feel like I have the need to prove myself anymore. So at the same time, he was looking for a feudal lord who would entrust him in the elaboration of large-scale strategies. So basically, he was looking for jobs to work as a strategist and a swords. He continued to train people in the art of swordsmanship at this time. So at the same time, he was looking for a feudal lord who would entrust him with the elaboration of large-scale strategies. However, Musashi's rigor and precision sometimes made as disquieting an impression as the blade of his sword. This is something that can also be seen in his works of art. However, Musashi's rigor and precision sometimes made as disquieting an impression as the blade of his sword. This is something that can also be seen in his works of art. This is without doubt one of the reasons he was not able to obtain the position he was looking for with one of the greatest feudal lords. I am convinced that Musashi was a very great master of the sword, but I also think that the several masters in the history of Japanese swordsmanship attained a level that was equivalent or superior to his. In accordance with the custom of the time, in referring to himself, Musashi used the term bushi. The term appeared in the Nara period, the 18th century. Samurai comes from the substantive form of the verb sabaru, which means to serve, or to remain at the side of someone important, and was itself an evolved form of older samaru. Samaru. All right, yeah, so main thing what I was trying to touch on was basically the word mikiri. Mikiri is basically discerning the state of situations or things with incisive precision. So basically choosing your battles, man. The issue I'm dealing with right now was that I was given information and they trusted me not to say anything, and I agreed when I received the information that I wouldn't do anything. So, what do I be someone, it's an issue that needs to be confronted. These guys aren't confronting it out of good faith. So I have to just kind of sit back and accept things as they are, and just hope it changes along the way, or find ways in my life that I can just kind of nudge it in the right direction, if you know what I'm saying. So, one of the concepts for this channel is to do what the samurai call musha shugyo. Musha shugyo is basically traveling for improvement. So I'm going to read this real quick. The shuriken, okay, this is really cool. So, shuriken was a term for a secret technique. Nowadays in jiu-jitsu, you can't really have a secret technique because people will end up seeing it and it'll be videoed at a tournament or something like that, and people will figure it out, which is what's been happening. So the evolution of jiu-jitsu has been kind of crazy to most people. It's mind-blowing. It's really cool to be a part of and to see and watch these things as they happen. But yeah. So this is about traveling for improvement. Schools of swordsmanship appeared beginning in the 15th century, and the practice of musha shugyo, traveling for improvement, became customary among warriors. Some men traveled with the idea of finding a liege lord, others to improve their art, and still others for both purposes. The last was the case for Musashi during a certain period of his life. For the feudal lords, receiving men during their musha shugyo made it possible to obtain information from other regions. And for future vassals, the knowledge accumulated in the course of these travels became useful stock in trade. During these journeys, a warrior traveled on foot, and if he encountered an adept worthy of facing, he asked him to fight. If the adept was the master of a dojo, it was often necessary first to fight against his disciples. In any case, the result of this type of bout, if one lost, could be serious wounds or even death. Even if one traveled to win these combats, one could not remain forever unscathed. Many adepts perished in the course of these travels. Toward the end of the Edo period, training armor became widespread and the number of accidents diminished considerably. But in Musashi's time, a bout between adepts often caused the death of one of the protagonists. Thus, the musha shugyo was a journey in the course of which one put one's life on the line in order to make progress in the way of the sword. The art of Shuriken was indispensable for this kind of journey, not only for fighting, but so that one could survive. One of the greatest obstacles for the traveling practitioner of swordsmanship was hunger, because he did not always have money in his sleeve. Someone making musha shugyo sometimes had to earn money in town and sometimes had to find his food in nature. He also had to sleep outside in the rain or snow. For adepts of this period, the challenge of living rough in nature seemed like a suitable element of the strengthening of mind and spirit. Food gathering and small game hunting were obligatory. In those days, there were many wild animals in the forests and mountains. The art of Shuriken was not only useful but indispensable for those on musha shugyo. The Art of Shuriken was not only useful but indispensable for those on Musha Shogyu, who had not only the explicit objective of facing adepts to improve their art, but the implicit objective of getting through the trials of living under the hardest conditions. That makes me think of like Wim Hof. You know, when I was living in New York, it got so cold that I felt like I had to do like Wim Hof breathing just to go for a walk in the snow. But there is something about facing that cold that you have to dig deep, something deep inside of you. That's what I'm really obsessed with. Is one of the reasons I love jiu-jitsu, and the reason I'm kind of obsessed with things like that is because we don't push ourselves in this modern society. We live in like such cush times that we never really have to, fight for our life. And jiu-jitsu is the only way to kind of like to induce that, to where you have to dig deep and you have these processes and stored energy in your body that you can go further than you ever thought you could go. Same thing with the Wim Hof method, things like that. Wim Hof, that is his thing. It's like facing the cold and learning to endure extreme cold situations. And that's part of like what the samurai would do. They saw that as another part of their challenge because they're traveling through these countries and enduring and living the hard life, having to hunt game, having to live in wilderness, out in the wild, make their own places to live just so they can improve their art. So it's facing the environment, enduring the elements, along with facing new training partners. Pretty cool. This is actually really cool. So we're going to get into Shuriken. We're going to understand that a little bit more in a second because it's really cool. Whether or not Musashi learned the art of Shuriken from his father, he must have practiced and developed it further himself in the course of the long years of traveling during which he shaped himself as an accomplished practitioner of strategy. So, Shuriken is like a secret art. This will explain it. Musashi and the art of Shuriken. Throwing an object to defend yourself is a spontaneous reaction for anyone who has an object or a weapon in hand's reach, especially in the time of war. When responding to an unexpected lance or an nagata attack, it was natural to throw a stick, knife, or sword, or whatever one had. This is how the art of Shuriken must have developed, out of necessity. So, Shuriken is the art of throwing something. So, in particular, it was a secret technique of how to throw your sword. You could throw your short sword or your long sword.